Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Cropper here. I have a dark and disturbing thought, perhaps, maybe. It's the idea that socialism might be a luxury. Because you find socialism where there is something to socialize. Venezuela, for example, has more oil reserves than anybody but Saudi Arabia, maybe more than Saudi Arabia. It's low quality oil with high sulfur. So anyways, they have something. That's why what happened to them happened to them. Why did Germany become a national socialist basket case? Well, they're extremely well educated. They had universities there for centuries before the Nazis came around. They had guys sitting around writing in books about nonsense that they called philosophers for a long time before the Nazis came around. So they were a very advanced, very well-educated society, and there was a lot to seize and use and distribute, and the same isn't quite so true of Russia. They had to liquidate a large amount of their population to get very small amount of industrializing done, and more industrializing was done with the help of the United States during World War II than anything leading up to it. And a lot of the plants that America built for the Russians during World War II were still in use when Russia fell apart. America had phased those plants out in the 50s and 60s because they were disgusting and dirty and inefficient. But the Soviets used them right up to the day that the Soviet Union fell apart. So we built Russia. Germany was built by intellectuals, by an educated class for decades and for a couple centuries before the Nazis could come and take over. You don't see socialism gripping, whatever, Ethiopia or whatever it is. Now you might counter and say, Mr. Cropper, they live in a socialist paradise of some kind. That's what socialism would bring you back to, is no electricity and mud huts and stuff. And I would say, yeah, fair enough, okay. So that would prove my point again, that socialism is a luxury. They can't practice socialism in mud huts. They can't practice sharing wealth. They don't have any wealth. So socialism is something that occurs when there is wealth. Now, let's just put that in our pocket and assume that that's true. If socialism has to occur only after there is wealth. Yaron Brook has addressed this recently, and I'm speaking in July or June of 2019. He's recently addressed this question: why is there so much socialism in the world if it doesn't make sense, and if people have seen it fail? And he says he thinks that's the biggest question about it, is people have seen it fail so many times. Why do they keep going for it? But I think that if we look at it as an option that becomes available sometimes, and that option may or may not get turned on, but it only becomes an option on the board of switches sometimes. If we look at it this way, then we can see that socialism is rampant today, and will possibly is going to come into a golden age of some kind. Not communism, maybe. Maybe communism's seen it, but maybe socialism hasn't, right? And to be fair, Venezuela doesn't have 1 million people in gulags. It's sent 3 million people, away as migrants trying to get the hell out of there. But it's not doing what Nazi Germany or Soviet Russia did. It's running people over in the streets. It's shooting people. Sure, but it's not doing the systematic, murderous stuff that Soviet Russia and Nazi Germany did. So, maybe socialism will continue to grow and get bigger and bigger because societies have so much wealth, they'll be tempted again and again to seize the wealth around them if they don't understand where it comes from and why it's there. And, just because you're walking down a street and you walk past a lamppost that costs $50,000, probably, in all likelihood, the government probably paid $50,000 for a $10,000 lamppost. And the electricity run that one lamppost is 10 times your electric bill for your house for the month. Just because that's true doesn't mean you're oppressed. It might mean that you're privileged. You don't need socialism. You've already got it. You don't need the rich to distribute their wealth to you. You don't need to get your piece of the wealth. You've already got it. You've got socialism if you can just go pay $1,000 for your deposit and rent an apartment. with electric and water and gas hookups and a fire department nearby and a police station nearby and schools nearby. The schools are shit. The schools are terrible. Don't start me. If you've got all that infrastructure in place and you think that you need wealth distributed to you from somebody else, you're insane. There's already a massive amount of socialism, if socialism means the sharing of wealth. That's already there. We don't need to force it on people. We don't need the government to force us to do it. The rich people build rail lines for us without anybody asking. The government has to stop them from doing it. The government stops the rail. You know, they used to actually stop railroads from building rail lines in order to stop destructive rail building, because they said if you build 2 or 3 rail lines, then none of the companies can make any money and they all go broke, and then there's no railroad at all. So their logic led them to say, okay, you have to get your railroads approved, and that was a beginning of catastrophe, of course. So I think we've made our point here. Socialism might be a luxury. If you're one of the fools that think socialism means sharing the wealth from rich people, then look around you. You are surrounded by wealth that rich people have put out there in order to make our societies and cities livable and profitable and enduring. You're surrounded by that stuff, and they haven't done it just for you. They've done it for larger purposes, but you're the beneficiary of it. You can walk around on these streets and sidewalks that cost so much money you can never imagine. You couldn't pay for a single fire hydrant hookup if you saved up for a year. And yet there are fire hydrant hookups all throughout every city in America. And you think that you need to distribute money from the wealthy back to you. Baloney. It's already happened. If socialism is a luxury, then it's already in place, and if we don't educate people about why that wealth is there and where it came from and the fact that it's good for that wealth to be there, if we don't educate them about this, then they're going to keep on trying to seize it. And there's going to be more and more of this wealth to seize. We're getting more and more productive. There are more and more factories full of more and more robots making more and more stuff, while us humans run around on the streets or play video games and stuff. You know, this future of the universal basic income. What if we all get so wealthy that there are no jobs? There already are no jobs. Who carries hay bales to cows every day? Farming was the only thing for thousands of years. Until 100 years ago, 90% of people were farmers until 100 years ago. All these people who are not farmers are basically doing what farmers consider nothing. We are doing nothing jobs. We're walking around in some sort of an air-conditioned building all day, and then we go home and say we're exhausted. So we are already unemployed, all of us. And we walk around saying, what are we going to do when we don't have jobs? You're not doing work. If you think you need the rich to redistribute their wealth to you, then you're a socialist ninny.